Hello again, everyone. This is Paul Ostrow, and I'm very pleased to be moderating the eighth of our 10-part series on how we regain trust in our Minnesota civic institutions. Tonight's interview is on the topic, is the Fourth Estate dead, or are we forging a new transformative era of independent journalism? And we have a wonderful guest with us tonight, very, very well suited to discuss that topic with us. Patrick Coolican, welcome to the program.
Good to be here.
Patrick is the editor in chief of the Minnesota Reformer. Minnesota Reformer is a non-profit independent media source. Uh, Patrick comes to us with history before that with the Star Tribune as a Capital reporter. Also had stints with the Las Vegas and Seattle newspapers as well, and was named the Journalist of the Year by the Minnesota Society of Professional Journalists in 2025. Again, thank you, Patrick, for being with us. I also want to introduce our panelists. We are joined by Hasini Guntipalli. Hasini is the 3rd Congressional District representative on the Minnesota Youth Council. She's also a committee chair on the Youth Council. Hasini is also the founder of Connect with a Cause, which has mobilized over 1,200 students to volunteer, and has also published 33 Journeys, a collection of global change makers. Hasini, you've done an awful lot at a very young age, and we're thrilled to have you with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're also very pleased to have one of our board members who is also a future leader, Feven Tesfaye. Feven is a senior at Burnsville High School. Feven also serves on the Minnesota Youth Council as the 2nd Congressional District representative, advocating for youth-centered education. And Feven also serves as the student representative to the Burnsville-Egan-Savage School Board. Feven, thank you so much for being on our panel.
Thank you.
Janis Clay is the executive director of the Civic Caucus. Janis has a long history as an independent voice and a student of public affairs, and has shepherded the Civic Caucus through our new era, and also serves, I know, on many, many other volunteer boards. Janis, we're thrilled to have you join our panel tonight.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we are joined by Paul Gilje, who has also served as the executive director of the Civic Caucus, a staff writer for the Star Tribune a few years back. After serving as a Star Tribune staff writer, Paul had a distinguished career as the associate director of the Minnesota Citizens League, really during the heyday, I would argue, of that organization, and specifically led any number of efforts, including the Minnesota Miracle and the tax sharing initiatives of the Citizens League. Paul just brings a wealth of knowledge to this conversation. Paul, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So, Patrick, I want to open things up with kind of a conversation starter, if I could. And my question for you is, can any media outlet in today's partisan climate be seen as objective and independent by all political viewpoints? And how are you at the Reformer trying to develop that trust in your readers?
Well, I think it's a difficult standard to achieve, and I'm not even sure that it's something that would be even desirable. And the reason I say that is because there's a kind of open and explicit use of disinformation in our political discourse now that was even 15 years ago would have been considered really beyond the pale. And I hate to turn this partisan already, but the current president of the United States has skillfully used um, skillfully used disinformation to win political power. So, in order to win the trust of his supporters, then journalists would have to really ignore much of what he says. Um, so that's the kind of conundrum that we face. Let me go back and talk a little bit about this current media moment and why things are the way they are. It used to be that there were only a small number of people who were in the mass media, and because there were very high barriers to entry, you had to own a printing press or have a broadcast license. The internet changed all that, completely democratized media. Anybody with a phone hookup could suddenly become a journalist. And I think it's a difficult question, but um, it certainly democratized media. So someone like myself, with some backing, not much backing, can suddenly have a local news outlet with substantial reach and influence. And we were bringing stories to the fore that, I mean, the reason I left the Star Tribune was because I didn't think that they were doing the kinds of work that I thought needed doing. And so you could easily say that we improved the political discourse because of this scrutiny that we were bringing to institutions and to political figures. On the other hand, in this democratized environment, you don't have these gatekeepers. So you used to have, like I said before, these a few people or a few institutions of mass media, and um, they were successful at keeping out really like conspiracy theories um, and willful disinformation. Um, there and that had its benefits, obviously, because now we have members of Congress who think that the Jews control the weather through space lasers and everything else. So democratizing media has opened it up and allowed lots of voices that were heretofore hard to find. There were populations that were not well represented that suddenly have access to a listening and watching public. But on the other hand, not having that gatekeeping means that we have subjected especially our political system, to all kinds of really toxic discourse. We at the Reformer, what we're trying to do, we're not trying to be all things to all people. We're not trying to be the Star Tribune. We view our role as being more a little bit more adversarial and confrontational, because we think that I think that that was missing to a degree, and the way that we try to build credibility is simply by trying to be intellectually honest and go at the work with ethical news gathering guidelines. And so that means that if we discover that uh, someone is uh, stealing money from the public, it doesn't matter if they're a Democrat or a Republican, we're going to go after that story. Um, Now, to me, it's in our self-interest because we get more readership that way, and we're having more of an impact because we have credibility across the spectrum. So, I mean, I know that's a long answer, but I think, the shorter answer is journalists themselves have to be intellectually honest and have integrity. The problem is, like I said, anybody, excuse me, anybody can call themselves a journalist and put out anything and really poison the well. Um, And let me also say about I know the theme here is restoring trust in institutions. The media is in a strange spot here because, for one thing, there's this concerted, well-funded effort to undermine our credibility, and there has been for decades. Um, you know, there was the establishment of an alternative kind of information ecosystem, whose sole purpose um, was both to make money, but also to undermine the credibility of what they called mainstream media. Um, so that's one point to make. And then the other is that by virtue of the fact that we are often scrutinizing beloved institutions, we're pointing out that, like, let's say, the Mayo Clinic is throwing its weight around at the legislature. Well, people love the Mayo Clinic. Or that the Minnesota Vikings, in our case, we did a story about a development project. They were alleged to have engaged their subcontractor to have engaged in wage theft. Um, why are you being so hard on my beloved Vikings?
Hmm.
And so it's just in the nature of the business that we're in that we are going to make people mad and be unpopular. And I think we kind of have to be okay with that. Um, and I don't mean to question the whole premise of your program
No,
here, but
that's fine.
to a certain extent, it's we shouldn't believe everything we read or see, and it's good to be skeptical of our media and to be an educated media consumer. But I will certainly admit that it's been an ugly few decades for American media. Some of that is things that we've done to ourselves, and some of that, like I said, is it's an effort to undermine us, and some of it's just the circumstances of the role that we play.
Oh, Hasini, I'll jump to you. You probably every year of your life, the media has been under attack, I imagine. Uh, I'll let you start with your question for Patrick.
With my question,
Yes, if you could.
um,
Or we can come back to you if you'd like someone else
It's
to
yeah,
go
okay if
first.
you don't have a question.
No,
yeah,
no, no, that's fine. How about you? We'll come back to you, Hasini. How about you, Faven?
yeah. I kind of want to touch on what you said about chasing stories that are not only informative, but also would, in your benefit, get you a lot of clicks and interest by you seeking the truth. But can you talk about the fine line about chasing stories that are both clickable, but also still like possessing the truth. Specifically, politically speaking, I know polarization has been a very essential topic. And I know many different legislators, specifically talking about the state, have mentioned how the media often creates a larger narrative of separation than is actually true. Do you think that is correct, that the purpose of the media has led to an increase of anger and hostility, or do you believe you're just reporting what you see and that the outcomes are what they are?
That's a good question. To some extent, it's fair. I mean, but that's not a new thing. We would look for points of conflict, because that's what interests us. Um, I would say most journalists um, are not interested in just chasing clicks. Um, their bosses might be, um, but I mean, even I would say even the bosses now, and we're kind of exempted from this because we're a nonprofit. They're chasing subscribers, which to me is different than chasing clicks because you chasing a click is easy. You put a woman and you have a story about a woman in a bikini who gets in a car crash and Maybe she gets bitten by an alligator at the end. And if you put all that in a headline, that's chasing clicks. But to get subscribers, you need credibility. Um, putting that aside, yeah, I mean, we do look for points of conflict, but I mean, to say that we're the cause of something that we're covering, I think is unfair, especially when you look at these politicians' social media feeds. I mean, they're saying nastier stuff than we would ever even really than we often report. Now, it's true that those we often will overcover some of those folks. But again, that's always been true. We've always been attracted to um, the the elected officials who are, frankly, the most interesting. And you know, if I could easily be fairly accused of going after stories that are, to me, more interesting. Um, so sure, but on the other hand, you know, at least in our publication, like we have a wide, a big definition of interesting. So like we had a story last night and today about that was explaining Medicaid funding. I don't think most people would think that that's chasing clicks. But it's of interest to me personally and to us, and we think it's also important to to Minnesota voters. I take seriously the fact that we are nonprofit, and so not that we would make any money. There's no way we would, but um, that to me, that and the First Amendment, these are two ways in which government has protected our activity, and so therefore we must give something back. And so that's kind of my personal view of it. Um, so politicians will complain about us, um, but they need to look in the mirror because there's a lot of them who are completely unserious about governing, and they will blame us for engaging in activity that they themselves are absolutely guilty of. All you have to do is look at their social media feeds.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Patrick. And thank you, Faven. Janice?
Okay. Well, kind of harkening back to your talking about the reformer being, oh, I have some echo. Is that me that's echoing?
No.
Okay, good. Can't hear. Anyway, you're part of the nonprofit business model. And I know in some communities are, they don't have like wealthy funders or that model just won't work, but they're still extremely important work that the newspaper needs to be there for. So if you could just talk a little bit about that, and I'm particularly thinking of just the pressure that newspapers are under and the number that are disappearing, and the important role they've played for so long and will continue. I mean, are they a public good or are they just a business that needs to survive? And a nonprofit needs to have, wealthy funders or foundations or something. So, how do how do newspapers survive and be trusted and continue to do their work in that kind of environment?
It's a huge challenge. Two newspapers close a week in the United States for the past however many, a couple decades. And you know, we have half as many working journalists, print journalists, I think, as we did, say, 20 years ago. Um, and there's now emerging evidence about what happens when a community loses its newspaper. You get more public corruption, you get higher taxes, um, and you know, I mean, if nobody's watching, then people will try to get away with stuff. And so that is a huge concern. The business model is broken. It was all based on monopoly economics and especially classified advertising, which is this. Our youth members of the panel won't even, they'll be like, what was that? You know, like if you wanted to sell your truck, your used truck, you had to put an ad in the newspaper and it was like really expensive. This is before Craigslist. So that's all gone. Um, what we're doing to try to relieve the pressure on these small newspapers is that we are not just allowing, but we're encouraging free republication of our stories. So this is especially important for these newspapers that don't have any capital coverage or don't really have any political or policy coverage. They can grab our work for free, um, and republish them. And I get a report every week, and dozens of papers across the state are doing so every week. And during Operation Metro Surge, there were papers across the country that were doing so. Um, so, that's not, it's solving the news desert and information ecosystem um, collapse is a little above my pay grade. But clearly, we do need some kind of solution here. I mean, philanthropy is stepping up. That's certainly one way to go. A lot of people talk about should there be some sort of government support. I'm a little skeptical of that. I don't really like taking. I don't really like the idea of us being on government support while we're also trying to scrutinize government and be a tough judge of government. There are probably ways that it could be done. Well, there was the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and it supported NPR and PBS, and look what happened there. That then you're at the whim of whoever's in office. So that's another problem. You could do stuff like that would be a little more indirect, like tax credits for a subscription. You can give a subscription to when somebody graduates high school or something. I know there's all kinds of ways I think that you could support local news via the tax code or what have you. But it's certainly a challenge. And in that vacuum, it's been completely filled with social media. So people are getting a lot of their local news or state news, with a lot of unsubstantiated, I mean, really gossip that they see on Facebook or Nextdoor. I mean, none of this is vetted. It's really toxic. And obviously, from my standpoint, it's pretty unfortunate. I'm just not sure at the moment what the solution is, although certainly the nonprofit, we're the fastest growing media segment, and I think it's an exciting place to be.
Paul Gilje. Oh, Janis, do you have a follow-up?
Well, I was just going to say, are we kind of going back to the days when newspapers did used to be more kind of viciously partisan at times, and maybe we've been in a golden age of
Yeah, I mean,
sort of less partisan for a while.
Yeah, this is a newer development. That's really only the last 100 years or
Yeah.
so and you had these monopoly economics and you had this sort of gravy train, and then there was this ethic, this ethos that you found in newsrooms that was, we're separate from the business side,
Mhm.
and we are objective, we're separate from the partisans, and it was a great thing. But it's gone, it's over, and for the most part. And so yeah, there is an earlier, there's a 19th century model here where every industrialist had a newspaper and political parties had a newspaper and labor unions had a newspaper. And I think were people better informed or worse informed them? I'm not really sure. But clearly this is a new moment.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Janis. Paul?
Pat, I want to thank you very much for the role you are playing to help us gain information about our state. As you point out, this is no place to become a millionaire, but you're dedicated. What I need is just some practical advice. I want to keep it informed every day with the NPR, with MinPost, with Minnesota Reformer, with Star Tribune, Pioneer Press, and all of them are online. What kind of advice do you have for us who are out there? How to make best use of that online time to make sure we don't miss something? I want to get your scoops as well as the other scoops.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I have trouble keeping up with it, and it's my job to. Um, so you know, um, we generally try to be like generous when somebody else breaks the story, like we're gonna tell people about it. Um, and I think that's important, again, back to the sort of intellectual honesty and rigor. Um, I mean, I'll tell you my own kind of media diet. Um, I read Axios is very quick, and then NPR's Capital View is another quick read, and then obviously um, ours. I think um, we're not going to tell you everything that's happening, but I think it's a distinctive view, and then the Star Tribune's Hot Dish. So those are four newsletters that I think you can read in roughly 20 minutes. Um, and then, each one will have links to longer stories if you want more. So maybe that's like a lot to keep track of, but four, that keeps you pretty well up to date on local news and politics. And then I think, I would choose one national paper um, to also do their morning newsletter. The At this point, it's really just, I guess, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. And I think Bloomberg and Reuters, and I mean, I think the newsletter um, medium has been fantastic overall for news consumers.
Thank you.
Um,
Can you tell us about the connection you have nationally? At least that's what I thought I'd read, that that Minnesota Reformer is part of a national network.
We are, yeah. So there's a national nonprofit called States Newsroom, and they are we're focused. We were the 12th state. There's now 39 of us, 39 states, with 39 operations. We have partnerships in the other 11 states. And the idea was, let's set up operate small politics and policy journalism outfits in state capitals, because that is first of all, that's where a lot of the decisions being made that are the most influential in people's lives. Okay, because stuff is not really happening in Congress. Like every couple of years, they put out a big bill. But generally speaking, at a day-to-day level, it's your city hall, your county building, and your state legislature. They're the ones who are determining school funding, university funding, road funding. Is gambling and pot legal in your state? Abortion, all those are happening at the legislature or maybe city hall. And so they were concerned about this collapse of that ecosystem of state capital coverage. And so they looked to fill that gap. And I think we've done a pretty good job. We're now the largest state-based news organization in the country. We have, a couple hundred reporters at those 39 outlets, and we're growing. So we're part of that. Each one has its, we have autonomy. So we're very different than Iowa because um, we have, like in Iowa, they've emptied out their Capital Bureau. The Des Moines Register and all the papers there used to have robust capital coverage. They just don't anymore. So they're just trying to provide like straight capital coverage that is lacking. And that's true in a lot of states. With us, it's a little different because the TV stations, NPR, MinnPost, and of course the Star Tribune. There's not really robust capital coverage here. So that was why it was important for us to really have a different identity and look for different types of stories, which is what we've done.
You don't have a full-time person at the Capitol in Minnesota.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Reporter?
Yeah. Usually it's Michelle Griffith. And we usually, in a normal session, we would have always somebody there every day, and then usually two other people, maybe even three, cycling in and out, based on whatever they're working on. The legislature, the state capitol, state government, the governor, that's our bread and butter for sure. Now, this year has been different because of Operation Metro Surge. So it's
Yeah,
required
thank you.
very different kind of coverage, and we've really, and also this year at the legislature, I don't really expect anything to happen. Um, and so I'm kind of okay with having one person there this year.
Paul, why don't you take it?
Okay, so I want to open it up again, but Patrick, I want to ask a question about you're taking care of you're a big part of the supply, creating the supply of the right kind of information. I think we all think you're doing a wonderful job of supplying good, objective, tough, investigative journalism. What do we do about the demand for it? So all of us that are on this call, love public policy. We're interested in politics. We're interested in government. Um, but it certainly seems like there's a large, regardless of ideology, there's a large number of people that are just tuned out. And I'm guessing you've thought about this. How do we create, especially among young folks like Hasini and Feven that are going to be our future leaders? How do we create a demand for the right kind of information that people really want it and demand it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's an important focus. We need to improve literacy rates significantly,
Hmm.
and get people to really enjoy reading. And it's not, I understand that some people it's hard for them, and they're better um, with audio and that kind of thing, and that's okay. But in general, we just have to improve the education system and make people enjoy um, that lifelong learning, and and also, I mean, right now at this moment, we really need to be concerned with technology in the classroom and just what we expose, how young people are exposed to different technology. Um, there's no way that watching 500 short form videos a day is good for you or your brain. It's not going to create good news consumers, um, and it's not going to create good citizens. And then, we also have to be concerned about, the next thing obviously is AI. I mean, it's not next, it's happening. And so, I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist, but it seems to me that it's basically outsourcing cognition, and reading something, reading a book, or even a magazine or newspaper article is a lot different than reading a summary of it. And um, we are returning to an age of image and folklore. And I don't think it's very compatible with a complex liberal democracy,
Hmm.
personally.
Hmm. Wow. Thank you for that. Hasini, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if this is, if you have something you want to jump in, I would defer to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So, at the very beginning, you spoke about how there used to be like high barriers to entry, and now that those are gone, there is not as much strong gatekeeping. And I guess like what we're all talking about is like redefining that trust. And you also spoke about how like over the past 20 years it's changed significantly, and also how there are far less reporters and news outlets. So my question is, how has it changed to redefine that trust among those past 20 years? And also specifically maybe what is the Minnesota Reformer doing to actually build trust in that environment?
So how has trust declined?
Yeah, so you
Is
spoke
that
about how trust is declining, and my question is, what is being done over the years to regain it?
Yeah. Well, in our case, like I said, what we are trying to do is like if a story is worth doing, um, then we're going to do it. And um, so just for instance, I mean, people associate us with the left side of the spectrum, and that's fine. I totally understand that. They're not wrong. But if you look in our archives, you'll find a lot of really hard stories and commentaries about, say, Governor Walz, who has not spoken to us or he's not granted an exclusive interview to us in years. We have done hard reporting on um, fraud in Medicaid programs, stories that drew a lot of interest and, frankly, cheerleading from Republican readers. Um, but we didn't do it for that. We did it because it was an important story. It had a big impact on Minnesota government and therefore Minnesota people, Minnesotans. Um, again, I just go back to that intellectual honesty and that intellectual rigor, um, and um, not casting off stories just because we don't like where it's coming from or the impact it'll have on people we like, if that makes sense. Um, and but the thing is, like, a lot of people will say, why aren't you covering this? And, or they have these other criticisms. Many of them they're acting and speaking in bad faith. By that I mean, like, um, they're not fair arbiters of what's an important story to Minnesotans. They just want to push a partisan agenda. And so we need to distinguish between fair-minded critics, and we need to listen to them. And sometimes we need to change our course based on that fair criticism. So there's fair-minded critics, and then there's just, like I said, bad faith political operatives and actors who doesn't matter how many stories that are negative about the other side, they're never gonna say that we're credible, because again, they're self-interested, they're just pushing an agenda, and they're using us. So it's a hard environment to operate in.
Can I ask a follow-up real quick?
Yeah,
Yes,
yep.
please do.
So on that note, you're taking these actions to ensure that your work is honest, but how do you, I know like as a young person, we like sometimes we're not able to distinguish that as we like haven't taken in media for a long time, and then the media that we are taking in is much different than the media that was originally in place. So how do you communicate that to your audience to show that this is honest and that this is like done with the right intentions and right research?
Um, well, some of it's simple journalism rules, like if we're writing a hard story about somebody, like it's allegation of that they did something, we always make a good faith effort to talk to them to get their side of the story. And if and when they come talk to us, we will include that in our reporting. It should be up high in the story, um, just so telegraphing to the reader, like, okay, this person has something to say here, and we're going to tell you what it is. If you see something, if you read a story and it's like allegations about somebody, and it doesn't include their side of it, doesn't say like that they tried to, we tried to contact them or anything, like that should raise red flags for you. Um, if we use data in a story, like we always link to where we got the data. So you should be able to go and look at it. In fact, every time we make an assertion in a story, almost, it's always going to be attributed. We're talking to someone, we attribute, what they said. Um, if we get the data, I mean, almost every factual assertion that we make, we have to be able to tell you where we got it. And so this is something that I'm doing a lot with we have all the guest commentaries. So we have people are allowed to write a commentary. And by the way, I welcome everyone here to to submit one. Um, but one thing that I'm frequently doing is I'm going through and people will just kind of say things. They'll make these assertions, and I have to say, well, even if I'm pretty sure that's true, like you need to tell me where you got it so that we can link to it, and that hopefully builds trust with readers. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I want to attest to the fact, having submitted things to Patrick, he's a very tough editor
In a good way.
in a good way. So we'll throw this open to anyone who wants to jump in at this point.
Pat, Paul Gilje here. Tell us, if you would, whether we still have beat reporters. We used to have a lot of beat reporters. They're concentrating on education, labor, politics, all these, and they've got to be very knowledgeable in their field so they can pick up a story pretty quickly. And I'm just curious, do you see any movement in that direction today?
Well, on the one hand, as newsrooms have gotten smaller, they've not been able to do that as much. So like, at the Pioneer Press, for instance, I mean, they only have like a handful of reporters left. I think Fred is focused on the city, but they have other people who are writing about everything under the sun. And I think that's a very valid criticism that you know, when you're doing that, you kind of jump into a story in the middle of it, and you don't know the players, the process, the underlying policies, and it's very hard to make sense of that for readers. The Star Tribune is the exception. They continue to have a huge newsroom. They seem to move people around a lot, so that kind of gets in the way, it seems to me, of good beat reporting. But I've used that structure. Our labor report, he's kind of changing it up, but we had a guy Max Mesteract is our deputy editor. He was really focused on labor for years probably. And it was extremely helpful. Um, as after 6 months or a year, like he just understood it so much better because he was focused on it and people knew who he was and he knew who people were. And there's a huge advantage to it. One thing about the internet is, that people start a Substack, they have they have a little bit of expertise in something and they can really drill down on it. Like Jonathan Cohn is now at Bulwark, but I mean, he's been a healthcare guy as long as I can remember, and just really understands the entire healthcare policy playing field. And so, I mean, I think um, it's a great way to go. You can get too comfortable in a beat. Um, by that I mean you are you're you become sort of captured where you're part of that community. And I think this can happen in the business world, especially where, you're supposed to be covering Wall Street, but now you're sort of like one of the guys or gals.
Mm.
And I think this happens in Washington journalism. And, I think you need to be have an arm's length view of these people that you're covering, and not become part of their tribe. Um, because then you're not really doing the public's work there. You're doing
Thank
their
you.
work.
Paul, go ahead. Get another question in.
Yes. Who else wants to jump in?
Okay, I've got one that might be pretty quick, but if I've got my dates right, it looks like the reformer kind of started right when COVID descended upon us, and grew along with that. And that was just a interesting time on so many fronts. And I'm wondering what, if any, impact that had on just how things developed with the reformer and with your work. And
Yeah, well, I mean, we started January 2020, and everything in the world has gone terrible since then. So I like to think that I'm the Grim Reaper of Minnesota or something. Yeah, I mean, so a couple months after we started was COVID, and it definitely had an impact on the mental health of the staff, and that was a big challenge. The isolation, and I mean, like just like anybody, like we're just people like anybody else, and that was a huge impact. And then of course George Floyd was 2 months later.
yeah, yeah,
And so then we went right into that, and we were set up to cover the Capitol, the legislature, the governor. We were not really set up to be doing out in the streets, taking video of these raging infernos on Lake Street, but we adapted, and that's what we were doing for a little bit. And then, obviously the 20 election, and then we had a really, kind of a crazy 22 election too, because Roe v. Wade, and then the Democratic trifecta in 23 was a big story. And then obviously Tim Walz was elevated in 24, and then we had the assassination, and then Operation Metro Surge. So it's been kind of really nonstop um, for us. We're kind of would love to have a slow news summer, but I don't know that that's a thing anymore. Um, and so, yeah, it's been exhilarating and exhausting at the same time.
Could I interrupt just quickly and follow up on that?
Yeah.
Please do. Please do.
Looking to the long run, do you see your operation substantially expanding, perhaps merging with or taking over other outlets that are similar?
Uh, I don't really foresee that. I do see us having one more reporter, but that's we had five at one point. Now we have four.
hmm.
Now we have a report have one photographer, and she's also a social media specialist. Um, and that's to me like I'm not an empire builder. I don't really need to get bigger than that. Um, I like the team chemistry of a small team. Um, if I won the Powerball, would I build something bigger? Maybe. I don't know.
You're a reporter too, are you? You got your reporters plus you, so you got
It's
five of you.
me. Yeah, right now it's me plus four reporters and one photographer. And she's not even full time. She's just three-quarters contractor. So I would like to get to five reporters plus photographer. Um, that would be to me that's ideal. Um, but if you know where the money is, then I'm listening.
So, Patrick, you're punching above your weight. There's no question about that. It's amazing what you put out with such a small staff. We have Feven and Hasini here. It's too late for Paul, Janis, or myself, other than a commentary once in a while, to be part of the media. But we're going to make a pitch to, young people like Feven and Hasini uh, to join the Fourth Estate in this crazy time to be a part of media. Uh, what would you tell them?
Uh,
Would you recommend it? And if so, how would you make the pitch?
I still say that if you're really passionate about it, if you're really passionate about either public policy or writing, storytelling, I should say, um, um, then, or, investigative work, then yeah, make a go at it. And it's different than it was, but in some ways better, in some ways worse. But I also I would just caution that, like I said, there's half the number of journalists there were, and there just aren't that many jobs, and so and you have to be willing. I lived in somebody's basement my first job. I've lived in many states, places I never would think of myself as living in. Um, but that was the sacrifice I was willing to make. So if you're like, well, I don't want to leave Minnesota, well, that's going to be pretty tough. Um, you might have to go somewhere else. And I would just say, like, you have to be savvy. Like, I would get a degree in some subject other than journalism. Um, so that you could develop some expertise in something, like if it were economics or finance or something, like, because you want to have some sort of a niche and expertise. If you know another language, if you have facility with data, develop that expertise. And then also, it's kind of like, if you take your shot, I mean, think of it like going to Hollywood or Washington, maybe. Like, you take your shot and it doesn't work out. Well, now you can fall back on your geology degree or whatever, and do something else. But yeah, I mean, I think if there was anyone from the journalism schools, they'd be upset with me saying this, but I mean, I don't have it at my school. There was no journalism program, so I learned on the job. But yeah, I mean, it's just there's no to me. Yeah, I can't imagine doing anything else. It's a great caper, but it is tough out there, and I can't imagine what it'd be like just getting into the industry right now. Given I would just think of myself when I was 20, 25. I was so undisciplined, um, that I'm glad I got in under the wire.
Well, you've done great. So we're coming close to the end, and what I want to do is, and not everyone has to ask a lightning round question, but uh, what I like to do is what we call a lightning round. It's the way we finish up our interviews, Patrick. And so, any of our panelists, Janis, Paul, Feven, Hasini, if you have one quick question, just one last thing you want to know, make it really quick, and then we have you answer them at the end. So these aren't real complicated questions. These are just maybe a real quick question you have as a last question. You remember Paul Gilje when we used to do this. So whoever wants to jump in, and maybe we'll just start with you, Janis. We'll go left to right for me. We'll go Janis and then Paul, Faven, and Hasini. Lightning round question from you, Janis, and then Patrick will have you answer them all at the end.
Okay, well, my question does not qualify as quick or easy or anything, but I just wanted to hear a little more about your thoughts of how AI is gonna collide into this, newsroom and media sort of area, like it's seemingly gonna collide into everything.
Okay, that's a tough lightning round,
But
but I'm
that's
sure
not a
Patrick's up
lightning
to
round
it.
question.
Paul,
Yeah, I
what's
mean,
your question?
the big companies are like
Well, we'll
Axios.
have you answer them all at the end, Patrick. I'm
Oh,
sorry. That's not how we do this because we know we're running out of time. So, Mr. Gilje, what's your lightning round question?
I'm
Okay.
just curious whether Minnesota Reformer is not the best name for a nonpartisan group that has to get the facts. Sounds like it's got an agenda.
Oh, okay. That's a tough question for the lightning round. How about you, Faven? Do you have one
I would,
last quick question?
yeah, I would say, how does being an editor differ from being an ordinary journalist?
Ah, okay. Very good. And then how about you, Asini? We'll give you the
I
last
don't
lightning round question.
I don't know if this is too lightning, but do you think there is anywhere that like youth are getting it right in terms of media and their consumption?
Wow. Okay. So we have AI, we have the the Minnesota Reformer as a name. We have the youth getting it right about the media. And then Fabian, what was your question again?
How being an editor
Oh, how
differs from
being an
being a
editor differs
journalist.
from being a journalist. So you take those in any order you want, and then we'll let you wrap it up, Patrick.
Young people, I don't know. Young people are often smarter about things than old people. I'll totally acknowledge that. And so I don't want to be like the old fuddy-duddy. I'll just tell you that I watch a lot of short video myself, so it can't be all bad. Being an editor as opposed to being a just a reporter means I'm managing people. And if you have, I don't know if you have experience with that, like at your school already, maybe you realize how a group project that can be very challenging. It's a whole different set of skills than being a reporter, managing people. So,
Hmm.
um, the reformer, a lot of the name has to do with finding. You have to find something that's not in use, and also has an open, at the time, Facebook and Twitter were very important. So you had to have something that wasn't in use on Facebook and Twitter. I agree that it has sort of a 19th century feel, but I like that about it. And the word reform just means improve. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying we want to improve things. Um, AI, the big companies are moving into that space clearly, and I think that like weather stories and corporate earnings stories and even sports roundup stories almost certainly are going to be written by
Mm.
machines before long. We have a no AI policy, and I don't know. I'm sure that there's some things it's going to be able to do or is able to do that will maybe improve our efficiency and make our jobs easier or better. I don't know. But certainly as far as I'm concerned, like I cannot like my favorite journalists, I can't imagine them using it in that for writing. They may be using it for research.
Mhm.
Did I
So
get
thank you.
everybody?
Thank you. You got everybody. I'm going to invoke the moderator's privilege because I want to try to end this on a positive note. And I think we all really appreciate, Patrick, that you're giving us the straight scoop. And obviously, we have tremendous challenges and a lot of tough stuff right now. But I want you to end with hopefully your answer to this question. 5, 10 years from now, yeah, what is your most optimistic view of how we get through this? Put on your optimist hat if that's at all possible. Where could we be 5 or 10 years from now if we get this right? And I'll let you close it with that question.
I think that there is a burgeoning backlash against social media, and I think we're fine. I think that a portrait is emerging of them. They lost a civil case today. Meta did. That's the Facebook parent in New Mexico. I think they're the new tobacco companies.
Mm.
I think people are understanding that they have deliberately tried to mess with our brains and really broken our informational ecosystem. And so I do hope that there's that backlash against those companies, and they may be broken up, or there'll be civil suits that would perhaps fund legitimate news organizations. And I think that, possibly we will look back at the period between, say, 2015 or 2010 and 2030 as sort of aberrant, when America sort of went crazy, uh, catalyzed by the pandemic and, other events, but that we recovered our sanity um, at some point. That's the optimistic view of it, I guess.
It took us an hour and 2 minutes, but we got optimism out of you, Patrick. So no, all with all joking aside, you wouldn't be in the business you're in if you didn't think you and all of us collectively could make a difference. So there's an optimism inherent in all that, I think. So thank you for what you do. I want to thank all of our panelists as well, those who are watching us now and those who will watch us online on our YouTube station. And we look forward to our next session in April. And all the very best to you, Patrick, for continued success in your work.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Great. Have a good night.
All right.